the only thing that I see happening is criticism. I don't actually see action. And I'm waiting for the Democrats and the Republicans to out-MAHA each other.
Hello, and welcome to The Conversation. I'm Dasha Burns, Politico's White House bureau chief. And every week on this show, I invite some of the most compelling power players in Washington and beyond in for a chat to find out how they're navigating and shaping this incredible era of American politics. In a moment, I'll be joined by Vani Hari, better known as the Food Babe. We dive into her journey from campaigning for Obama as a Democrat to becoming a health and food blogger to becoming a key fixture in the MAHA movement, now advising RFK Jr. and spending time in the White House. Here's my conversation with Vani Hari. Vani Hari, the Food Babe, as many of your followers know you. Thank you so much for joining the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, let's take a step back for a second. 14 years ago, you were blogging about workouts and healthy recipes, and now you're spending time at the White House. You're advising HHS Secretary Kennedy. How did you get here?
Yeah. I grew up with two immigrant Indian parents who came here to the United States in the 1960s. And when my dad went back to get an arranged marriage with my mom in India and brought her here for her honeymoon, he said, if we're going to live in America, we're going to eat like Americans. And he introduced her to a McDonald's hamburger. And that's how I was raised. And, as a result, I was in and out of doctor's offices. I had eczema, had asthma, had allergies, had stomach issues. And no doctor ever asked me about what I was eating. It was always, here's a prescription drug. And so by my early 20s, I was on 9 prescription drugs, had 2 abdominal surgeries, and hit rock bottom in my health. And it was a wake-up call. So I finally decided to research my health. And I went from a processed food diet to a whole foods diet. And I was at a girls' weekend in Chicago, and I had an intervention, and the girls were like, hey, will you join social media? And it was these girlfriends of mine that convinced me to join so that I could share my recipes. And I said, well, why don't I just start a blog? And I wanted to call it eathealthyliveforever.com. My husband, who's the tech geek in the family, thought it was a terrible name. He found Food Babe for $10 on auction a few minutes later. And it was a fun, easy to remember name. And I thought, why don't we teach people how to become food babes? And
so you had a whole transformation over the course of the last, decade plus. You started out as a Democrat. You campaigned for Obama, but now you are firmly aligned with the MAHA movement. Take me on that political journey.
Yeah, I was really excited about the environmental policies, the food policies of the left. I really, really resonated with that. And during President Obama's election and during, when he was running for office during the campaign, he made this commitment that he was going to label genetically engineered ingredients. And he said that in 2007, and then the first half of his presidency, he never even addressed the issue. And that really bothered me, that someone I left work to campaign for and traveled all over the country and became a delegate and did all of this work for didn't uphold their promise. And so that year in 2012, the DNC was in Charlotte, North Carolina. So North Carolina had the front row of the DNC. And I used my, access to the front row to protest. And so I protested in front of the Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, on the issue of labeling genetically engineered ingredients. It was his presidency that I think led me to this apathetic nature in politics where I just stopped paying attention to politics after he left office. I didn't like politics. I thought, politicians come and go. They are all, lobbied by big food and big pharma.
So you instead actually ended up going after big food kind of on your own, right?
That's right. So it's faster to just go directly to the food companies and ask them to change and demand change and change consumer opinion about these products faster, and they will move faster, and the marketplace will move faster. And I was right, because in 2015, got so many different companies to start to remove chemicals. Subway.
Kraft was the big one.
Kraft removed artificial dyes in their Kraft macaroni and cheese. Subway removed a chemical called azodicarbonamide. They also went all artificial dye-free and artificial ingredient-free. They also went antibiotic-free, worked on a campaign getting antibiotics out of fast food. Caramel color out of Starbucks lattes and pumpkin spice lattes and drinks, getting the beer companies to tell us what's in beer for the first time.
So you talked about how you kind of got disillusioned with politics. You went your own way. It seems like things changed once RFK Jr. sort of came on the map. Talk to me about that relationship, how it started and where it's at today.
Yeah, no, Secretary Kennedy has been just an incredible amplification of my voice. And he, was there at the Senate hearing back in September, and he heard my testimony. He saw the reaction in the room, and he was there when I said this statement, which was, why is it citizen activists like me and other concerned citizens holding these companies accountable? Why isn't it people and politicians in Washington doing this work? And I looked him in the eye, I looked the other senators in the room in the eye, and they all nodded at me and they got it and they understood the assignment. And he took that assignment to the campaign trail. Secretary Kennedy saw the movement that was happening, and he said the first thing he is going to do when he's in office is going to ask the food companies to remove artificial food dyes, and he's upheld that commitment. And after he made that announcement and he was willing to support my voice, that's when, I got involved. And I helped him in any way I can in terms of, I was at his confirmation hearing. I wanted to hear every senator in that room and hear what they had to say and the criticisms they had. And I wanted to hear everything that was happening so I could help make sure that I got the truth out to the American public of why we need him so badly.
And your relationship now, how often do you advise him on what he's doing?
Well, I don't. I mean, it's not an everyday thing. And it's really just, I'm on the outside. I don't work for HHS. So I am pushing the work that I've always done forward. I don't work for him or anyone else at HHS. So it's really about making sure that this work that he's trying to do in Washington has public support because I want him to succeed.
Everything that you're saying, I think for a long time, if people just were in a vacuum and heard you talk about this, they would assume you're a Democrat. I think the wellness industry, the wellness movement was for a long time associated with the left, but that has really changed with RFK, with a lot of what you're doing with the MAHA movement and with how the Trump campaign really embraced that movement. Did Democrats lose you?
No, I think what happened is they lost the majority of the country, unfortunately. And you've seen that in the election, and you see that in the way what's happening right now in Washington. And it makes me really sad when I see Democrats sit on their hands and they are literally mute to these MAHA issues, which they were the vocal, cheerleaders of for so long, for so many years. And it's the only thing that I see happening is criticism. I don't actually see action. And I'm waiting for the Democrats and the Republicans to out MAHA each other. I keep waiting for that moment. I can't wait till there's a bill bigger and better and more pronounced of what can you do better than just removing artificial food dyes? Do you have any ideas, Democrats? I'm waiting for that moment.
Well, it's interesting. One of the reasons that Trump wanted to bring RFK into the fold was because he is a disruptor. He has these big sweeping ideas, these massive changes that he wanted to make. I think I've seen a lot of people in politics then get into government and kind of come against some of those roadblocks. I know MAHA moms in particular were really hopeful, had really high expectations for what RFK Jr. could do at HHS. For you, how have those expectations lined up with reality so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think I still understand that this is a big government bureaucracy. So I'm not expecting the amount of change that I would hope to see. I think I'm being realistic. I think very, dreamlike when it comes to other parts of my life. But when it comes to government, I just understand that it's just slow. It takes a long time. And so I think one of the things that has been very interesting to watch is watching Secretary Kennedy and the head of the FDA, Dr. Marty Makary, do things in a different way than any other administration has done to get things done faster than they would if they went the traditional route.
Do you want to see more actual legislation, though, like that actually banning some of these chemicals rather than just, asking nicely?
Absolutely. I mean, I would love to. And I think, that process is starting. I think the states are going to move a lot faster. And I'm really excited. I'm real bullish about this state bill in Texas that has 40 different chemicals using a warning label. Europe didn't ban dyes. They actually said, you know what? If you're going to use dyes, you're going to put a warning label that says may cause adverse effects on activity and attention in children. The food companies didn't want that warning label on it. So they voluntarily removed everything in Europe. That's what we're going to have here, is they're going to end up doing the same thing.
One of the things that some in the MAHA movement were a little disappointed in and frustrated with is that none of the MAHA reports or strategies have taken on pesticides. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, so the first commission report actually labeled out, which was very exciting, glyphosate and atrazine, which are two.
And then there was a lot of blowback, and then the next strategy didn't address it.
I think the next strategy, I think there's a lot of strategic things happening behind the scenes that maybe we don't have full purview into.
Are you disappointed that the administration hasn't taken on pesticides more aggressively?
If it was up to me, I would have Lee Zeldin and Secretary Rowlands roll up right under Secretary Kennedy. But unfortunately, we don't have that reality today. I understand that there's this bureaucracy in Washington where we have these different cabinet secretaries and their constituencies. But I think what we're dealing with here is the chemical lobby is very sophisticated. They are paying lawmakers in Washington to do their bidding. They have done this from the very get-go. They've done this for the EPA. I mean, if you look back at the historical things that Bayer Monsanto did to the EPA, which is basically ghostwrite scientific facts and data for our EPA to hide the harmful effects of glyphosate, we have some serious corruption within our agencies.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I heard from a lot of MAHA families while I was on the campaign trail is they were hoping that this administration wouldn't be beholden to those lobbies and to those interests as much as past administrations were. How do you grade them on that?
Well, I think, again, we're dealing with 50 different senators, right? We're dealing with several hundred congresspeople who all have gotten funding from various sources. And a lot of these sources have conflicts of interest with the MAHA's agenda. And so the more we fight about politics, the less we talk about the chemicals that are poisoning us. And that's where I really want to focus, is making sure that America knows how to protect themselves from these chemicals, how to avoid them at the grocery store, how to pick the right products. And that's why I'm an activist on the ground. That's why I don't work in Washington in terms of, for the government, because I think my role is more important even to make sure that Americans have choices and can make better choices so they can feed their families healthy options.
And it's that push and pull, right, of advocates and activists like you plus the government trying to get things done. You wrote on one of your Facebook posts a while back, you said that sadly, what you think can be accomplished with RFK conflicts with the complete deregulation that his boss wants to do. There's this tension between regulation and deregulation, I think, within the Trump administration for some of the goals they want to accomplish. What role do you think the government should play in accomplishing the goals you want to see?
Yeah, so I would like to get the truth out to the American people. I don't necessarily think it's the right thing for the President of the United States to tell me, what I should be doing with my health care or what I should be doing with my medical decisions. I think that decision is with me and my healthcare providers and my family. But I want to get true information about the risks of pharmaceuticals. I want to get true information about the risks of chemicals that I'm eating every single day. I want to know what's being sprayed on my food. I want to know that the government will look after the people versus the corporations when it comes to...
But I guess, what does that mean, government looking after the people versus corporations? What does that look like if not regulation?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely regulatory in terms of reducing the amounts of glyphosate being sprayed on our farmland, which is, one of the quickest ways to have the biggest bang for the bucks. And this is something that I think could be a huge win, is just ban or reduce the amount of glyphosate being allowed.
But I guess, is that via a ban? Is that legislation? Is that
it's regulatory? Yeah, it's the amounts of that are allowed for usage.
Have you raised those concerns to RFK Jr. and HHS?
He knows. He knows.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I've been trying to get at, is like,
he knows.
that push and pull between a Republican Party, conservatives who are all about deregulation, and some of these specific issues where you think, and a lot of folks like you think, the government does need to step in and actually
and
regulate.
I think the traditional leftist approach has always been, to go in and regulate, right? Maybe it's a different play in this respect. Now, again, I want to go back to my original sentiment about the government and how apathetic I am. This is the first time in my lifetime, in my adult, career ever, that I've been hopeful that we can have true information coming out and not be censored. And that is something in itself that needs to be celebrated, because up until this moment, artificial food dyes were safe. They were safe by the FDA, and that's what the food companies hid behind. Now they can no longer hide behind that.
Your message has clearly resonated with an American public that's skeptical of some of these large industries and the transformation of ingredients in our food over the past few decades. You've been criticized by some in the scientific community for going too far, for campaigns that aren't backed by science. How do you respond to that criticism? And do you think there are any instances when you've gone too far?
Yeah. So, for a long time, a lot of the criticisms I had were literally being paid for by the chemical industry. I mean, I had a professor that showed up in every article trying to criticize me and tell me I'm non-scientific, that was being paid by Monsanto Bayer. I had another professor who wrote a daily column on me out of Montreal that was also a mercenary for crop life. The people who have criticized me are largely the ones that don't want to see the status quo change. They think it's completely fine for American companies to poison us with ingredients they don't use in other countries. The other criticisms that I've had are things like, she says it like this, but it should be like that, because they don't like the fact that I translate scientific terms in layman's terms and I say it so that people can understand it, right? And I'm not saying I'm never wrong. What I am saying is I've been up against an enormous force of evil for so long. I mean, I had, an instance where I met the man, Dr. Richard Besser, who was the sole doctor on a segment on Good Morning America back in 2013 that said artificial food dyes were safe against my Kraft macaroni and cheese campaign. And he's changed his tune, right? And so science changed, opinion changed, experts changed their mind. And it's nice to be able to see that, because, it's very strange when the only argument they have against you is you're not an expert.
I guess my question is, have you evolved in how you talk about this and how you advocate since your early days, as you've learned more, as the science has evolved?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely got more mature,
I hope we all have.
I guess originally when I started off as a blog, there's a lot of things that I didn't have in place. Like I didn't have an advisory committee. And I created an advisory committee because I was like, I should have experts that I lean on to ask for advice or, to look at a scientific review, to give me their opinion. And, I created that. I created an edit policy. If there's anything that ever changes on the blog, you'll know about it.
What is the future of this movement? We talked about 2026 and 28. And when you think about those elections, you've been out there pressuring people in Congress saying, hey, if you don't get on board with this, you're going to have a problem in the midterms. I mean, how big of a factor is the MAHA movement going to be in campaigns and in elections in the coming years?
Yeah, if you are a senator, a congressman, congresswoman who is siding with the chemical industry, siding for these liability shields that are coming out, siding with taking away states' rights on doing these different bills on chemicals and SNAP reform and other agenda items. If you are someone who is going to make it so that it's harder to do the MAHA agenda, you're going to be on our hit list. We're putting the list together right now. We're putting together the faces and the people who are going to be on the chopping block. And the MAHA coalition's coming together, and we're going to figure out who's going to help this world become healthy again, who's going to help us reverse chronic disease and start to help our children.
If a Democrat comes out with a platform that you guys are on board with, should their Republican opponents be worried?
They should be. Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that's what's so beautiful about this coalition is that it's beyond politics. It's a bipartisan coalition. It's walks of all life. And so again, I truly believe when you make it about politics, if you make it about Democrat or Republican, then you miss the goal at hand. You let the chemical corporations win that are poisoning us.
Before I let you go, President Trump loves his Diet Coke. I wonder what you would tell him to drink instead.
Yeah, it's some kombucha.
It's got the fizz,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
it's got the fizz.
Yeah.
Vani Hari, thank you so much for joining the conversation.
Thank you.
This has been The Conversation with Dasha Burns. We'll be back next week. To catch future episodes of The Conversation, be sure to click the subscribe button below. Thanks for watching.